Ladies and gentlemen, there are moments in life when everything seems to stand still, when our prayers go unanswered, when doors close without reason, when confusion clouds the soul, and we begin to wonder, is God even listening? Let me tell you today, yes, He is. But He may be testing you before your breakthrough. Seasons of silence are often seasons of shaping. The first sign of testing is often silence. You pray, but there's no answer. You seek, but you find nothing. The silence is not punishment, it is preparation. God is not ignoring you. He is watching your reaction when you feel forgotten. Will you still seek Him when you don't feel Him? Will you still obey when it doesn't make sense? Delays are not denials. The second sign is delay. Just because the answer hasn't come yet doesn't mean it's not on the way. God's clock is not our clock. Abraham waited decades. Joseph endured prison. David faced years of hiding. What do they all have in common? God was preparing them for a breakthrough that required maturity, endurance, and trust. Delay doesn't mean God has changed His mind. It means He's getting you ready. Temptation intensifies before promotion. Have you noticed how temptation grows stronger just before something good happens? That's no accident. The enemy knows your potential, and so does God. You will be tested in your integrity, your patience, and your faithfulness. When you resist the temptation to quit, to compromise, to retaliate, you pass the test. Faith without evidence is the highest form of faith. The next sign is when you're asked to believe without evidence. Faith is not faith when you see the outcome. Faith is proven when you walk blindly but confidently. When God asked Noah to build an ark before the rain. When He told Moses to lift a staff before the Red Sea parted. When He called Peter to step out on water. These were all tests, and each passed test released a miracle. 5. Obedience in the unknown unlocks destiny. Finally, God will test your obedience in the unknown. Will you trust Him when the instructions don't make sense? Will you take the job, leave the comfort, sow the seed, speak the truth, when there's no guarantee of results? Breakthroughs come to those who obey without needing all the details. Testing is not punishment. It is a signal, a divine clue, that God is preparing you for something bigger than you can see. If you feel stretched, delayed, or forgotten, don't give up. It may be the final exam before your spiritual graduation. Hold on, stay faithful. Your breakthrough is closer than you think. There comes a time in every believer's life when the path forward feels clouded, when God's voice seems distant, and when prayers echo in silence. It is during these moments that we are tempted to question everything we've believed. We look at the circumstances surrounding us, delays, disappointments, detours, and we wonder if God has withdrawn His hand. But my friend, let me tell you this, God hasn't abandoned you. He may be testing you, and that testing is not to crush you. It's to prepare you. It's a divine signal that a breakthrough is drawing near. You see, God never promotes a soul without first preparing it, and His preparation comes not through comfort, but through challenge. Before every blessing, before every open door, before every elevation, there is a time of proving. The test comes to reveal the hidden things in our hearts, to refine what is impure, to strengthen what is weak, and to prove what is real. The test is not for God to see who you are. He already knows. The test is for you to see what He is forming within you. Consider the stories woven through Scripture. Abraham was promised a nation, but first he was tested with barrenness and delay. Joseph dreamed of leadership, but first he was thrown into a pit, sold into slavery, and wrongly imprisoned. David was anointed king as a young shepherd, but he spent years fleeing from a mad king before he ever sat on the throne. Every one of them had a promise over their life, but before the promise came the proving. And so it is with us. One of the clearest signs that God is testing you before your breakthrough is when everything familiar begins to feel unstable. The people you once relied on may seem distant. The routines that once brought comfort may lose their power. Even the spiritual disciplines, prayer, worship, reading the Word, might feel dry or heavy. This doesn't mean you're failing. It may mean you're in a holy classroom. God is shifting your reliance from feelings to faith. He's teaching you to walk not by what you feel, but by what you know to be true. There is a purpose in the silence. When heaven seems quiet, it often means that God is watching how you respond in stillness. In a classroom, the teacher is always silent during the test. That doesn't mean the teacher is gone. It means the time for instruction has paused, and now it's time for demonstration. God is watching to see if you will cling to His Word, even when you can't hear His voice. Will you still believe when there's no confirmation? Will you still worship when there's no visible reward? Faith that stands without feeling is faith that is strong enough to carry destiny. Another sign of divine testing is delay. Not every delay is a denial. Some delays are divine in nature. They are designed by God to develop the patience, endurance, and depth you'll need when the breakthrough comes. A delayed answer is not an unanswered prayer, it's an answer waiting for the right moment. Remember, the same God who created time is never late. He's not trying to frustrate you. He's trying to form you. Some doors remain closed not because they are locked forever, but because God is waiting until you're ready to walk through them with wisdom and humility. Testing also shows up in the form of temptation. Right before the promise is fulfilled, temptation often increases. The pressure to compromise your integrity, to take shortcuts, to seek approval from people instead of God, these pressures grow stronger. Why? Because the enemy wants to derail your destiny just before you step into it. But what the enemy means for harm, God uses as a test. Will you still do what's right when no one's watching? Will you stand firm in truth when it costs you something? Will you resist the easy way for the sake of the holy way? Every act of obedience under pressure is a declaration that you are ready for more. And sometimes the test comes in the form of uncertainty. God may call you to take a step without showing you the full path. He may ask you to obey without giving you all the details. That's when faith moves from concept to reality. True faith doesn't wait for evidence. True faith walks in the dark because it trusts the one who sees in the dark. When God told Noah to build an ark, there had never been rain. When He told Abraham to leave his homeland, there was no map. When He called Peter to walk on water, there was no safety net. But in each case, obedience in uncertainty unlocked the miracle. The testing season is not forever, but it is necessary. You may be walking through a valley right now, feeling pressed on every side. But remember this, gold is refined by fire, not by comfort. Diamonds are formed under pressure, not on the surface. Oil is produced when olives are crushed, and your breakthrough will come after your obedience has been tested and found true. Do not let the enemy convince you that testing means abandonment. The very opposite is true. God tests those He is about to trust with greater things. The testing is proof that something is coming. It's proof that your faith is growing. It's proof that heaven is preparing to release what you've been praying for. So hold on. Don't quit in the test. Don't surrender in the silence. Keep praying when it feels dry. Keep believing when nothing changes. Keep obeying when it's hard. The test is not the end. It is the final chapter before the next story begins. And if you stay faithful in the test, your breakthrough will come, not because you earned it, but because you were prepared to carry it. There is a season in the life of nearly every believer when the soul feels dry, when the fire that once burned bright begins to flicker, and when the presence of God seems distant, if not altogether absent. The prayers you used to pray with passion now feel routine. The songs of worship that once brought tears now pass through your lips without stirring your spirit. The scriptures, which once leapt off the page and into your heart, now seem still and silent. And in those moments, the temptation is to believe that you have somehow failed, that God has left, that something has gone wrong, that you've been cast aside. But let me speak directly to your heart. That dryness may not be abandonment at all. It may, in fact, be a sacred test. It may be that God is preparing you, refining you, and drawing you deeper into maturity, even when it feels like He's nowhere to be found. This season, this spiritual drought, is not unfamiliar in the story of faith. It has been walked by prophets, by apostles, and by the very Son of God. The wilderness experience, the dry land where heaven seems closed, is not a punishment for the faithful. Rather, it is often a place of transition between calling and commissioning. It's where shallow roots are deepened. It's where spiritual emotion gives way to spiritual conviction. It's where God asks the soul a quiet but weighty question. Will you follow me even when you can't feel me? We must understand something essential. Faith that depends on feelings is a fragile faith. It is a faith easily swayed by the winds of circumstance. But God desires to grow within us a faith that is rooted in truth, not emotion. A faith that holds firm not because of what we feel in the moment, but because of what we know to be eternally true. And so, He allows us, at times, to walk through seasons of dryness, not to harm us, but to train us. He removes the emotional high, not to distance Himself from us, but to teach us to walk by trust, not by sight. You see, when we are spiritually dry, we begin to realize how much we relied on feelings for assurance. But assurance based on feelings fades with the sunrise. Real assurance is born when we say, even if I feel nothing, I still know who He is. Even if the heavens are silent, I will still lift my hands. Even when I do not understand, I will still obey. That's where faith moves from infancy to maturity. That's when it ceases to be about experience and becomes about endurance. Many of the most powerful moves of God in the Bible came after long seasons of silence. The people of Israel endured 400 years without a prophet before the voice of one crying in the wilderness prepared the way for the Messiah. Job sat in silence while heaven observed. David cried out in the Psalms again and again, "Why have you hidden your face from me?" And yet he remained a man after God's own heart. Even Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane experienced that dark night of the soul where the weight of what was to come pressed so heavily that he sweat drops of blood and asked, "Father, if it be your will, take this cup from me." But the heavens were silent, and still he said, "Not my will, but yours be done." Spiritual dryness is not a signal to turn back. It is an invitation to press in. When God seems quiet, that is the time to listen more carefully. When worship feels empty, that is the time to offer it as a true sacrifice. When prayer is hard, that is the time to persist, knowing that the breakthrough often comes after the darkest hour. The silence of God is not the absence of God. It is often the evidence that He is doing His deepest work in you. A gardener does not constantly dig up the seed to check its progress. Sometimes the seed is buried and unseen, but it is during that hidden season that roots are growing. So it is with your faith. When you feel spiritually dry, do not confuse that with spiritual failure. You are not broken. You are being built. You are not forgotten. You are being formed. God is not done with you. He is drawing you into a place where your reliance shifts from emotional comfort to unshakable truth. He is inviting you to trust His character more than your circumstances. He is preparing you for what comes next, not through signs and wonders, but through perseverance and faithfulness. And those are the very qualities he blesses most. This kind of season does not last forever, but what it produces in you can last a lifetime. The maturity, the discernment, the quiet strength that is forged in the dry places of the soul become the foundation for everything else God builds on your life. They become the reservoir from which others draw when they too walk through their own dry seasons. God does not waste pain. He does not waste silence. He does not waste a single moment of your struggle. Every tear you've cried in secret, every whispered prayer in the dark, every worship song sung when your heart was heavy, he has seen it all. And he honors it, so do not give up. Do not lose heart. If your spirit feels dry, draw near anyway. If you feel nothing, seek him still. If the heavens feel silent, keep knocking. For just beyond the dryness, just beyond the silence, lies a break, through you cannot yet see. And when that breakthrough comes, you will look back and realize that the dryness was not a sign that God had left you. It was proof that he was preparing you to carry something greater. He was growing your roots deeper so your fruit could reach higher. There are moments in life when it seems like the world has gone quiet. You pray, but nothing happens. You cry out, but there's no response. You do all the things you know to do. You serve, you worship, you remain faithful. But instead of reward, there's resistance. Instead of breakthrough, there's silence. And in those moments, the question arises deep within. Is God testing me? Am I being prepared for something more? The answer, more often than we realize, is yes. God tests before he promotes. He refines before he releases. Before the miracle comes the proving. Before the break, through comes the trial. It's not a punishment. It's a process. And when you understand this, what once felt like abandonment begins to feel like preparation. God has a way of allowing situations to press on you, not to crush you, but to reveal what's in you. His tests are not about failure. They're about formation. He's shaping your character. He's building your endurance. He's strengthening your trust, because the truth is, we don't grow during easy times. We grow when we're stretched. We grow when the answers don't come right away. We grow when we're forced to trust, even when everything in us wants to panic. These are the moments when God does his deepest work. They may not feel like it at the time, but they are sacred. They are holy. They are part of your preparation. God doesn't rush development. He doesn't skip steps. He didn't do it with Abraham. He didn't do it with Joseph. He didn't do it with David, and he won't do it with you. Abraham waited years for the child God promised. Joseph spent over a decade enduring betrayal, slavery, and prison before he ever saw the fulfillment of his dream. David was anointed king as a boy, but he spent years running for his life before he ever sat on the throne. In every case, the delay was not denial. It was development. God was building them into the kind of people who could carry the promise without the promise destroying them. One of the first signs that God is testing you is that everything familiar starts to feel uncertain. The people you relied on no longer have answers. The confidence you once had in your plan starts to fade. You look around and it feels like things are falling apart, but maybe they're not falling apart. Maybe they're falling into place. God often removes our crutches so we learn to lean fully on him. He doesn't want us trusting the plan. He wants us trusting the planner. That means sometimes he'll let your best ideas fail. He'll let your carefully made timelines expire, not because he's cruel, but because he's clearing the path for something better, something you can't yet see. Another sign is when your spiritual senses go numb. You don't feel what you used to feel. Worship becomes routine. Prayer feels dry. The word doesn't stir you like before. And the enemy will whisper, "You've lost it. You're drifting." But don't believe that lie. The absence of feeling is not the absence of faith. In fact, Real faith often begins where feelings end. Faith says, I don't feel it, but I believe it anyway. Faith shows up when nothing else does. And God honors that kind of faith, not the faith that dances in the light, but the faith that holds on in the dark. He is not far from you. He's just quiet, watching what you'll do when the emotions are gone. Will you still worship? Will you still obey? Will you still trust? Temptation often increases in these moments. You'll be tempted to give up, to take shortcuts, to question everything. When you're tired and discouraged, the pressure to compromise grows. But remember, temptation isn't a sign that you're failing. It's a sign that the enemy sees what's coming. He attacks hardest when he knows breakthrough is near, so don't be surprised when the battle intensifies. Don't be alarmed when old struggles resurface. God is allowing the test to expose what still needs healing, what still needs surrender. It's not to shame you, it's to set you free. It's to make sure you step into your next season with integrity, wisdom, and purity. And then, sometimes, God asks you to obey with no explanation. He tells you to go, but doesn't tell you where. He tells you to stay, but doesn't say for how long. He tells you to give, to forgive, to believe, without giving you the full picture. That's when obedience becomes worship. That's when trust becomes real. If you only follow when it makes sense, it's not trust, it's calculation. But when you follow without knowing the outcome, that's when heaven smiles. Because you're not just following a plan, you're following a person, and that person is faithful. All of these signs, dryness, delay, temptation, silence, uncertain obedience, are not random. They are not meaningless. They are signs that God is testing you before your breakthrough. Don't despise the test. Embrace it. Walk through it with confidence. Not confidence in yourself, but confidence in the God who started this work in you and who will be faithful to complete it. The test won't last forever, but what it produces in you will. It will birth in you a faith that doesn't shake, a trust that doesn't waver, a maturity that doesn't fade, and when the breakthrough comes, and it will, you'll be ready to carry it. You'll be ready to walk in it. You'll look back and realize the testing wasn't a setback. It was a setup. It wasn't God withholding something from you. It was God getting you ready to hold something bigger than you thought possible. So if you're in the middle of the test, don't give up. Don't give in. Stand firm. Stay faithful. Keep walking, because your breakthrough is not just on the way. It's already being prepared. And when it comes, you'll know it wasn't just about what God gave you. It was about who He made you into while you waited. There are seasons in life when obedience feels more costly than ever before. Moments when the way forward is uncertain, the ground beneath your feet shakes, and yet God still asks you to trust Him. These are the moments when you are being tested, not just in your circumstances, but in your heart. It is in these testing grounds that God is searching for something deeper than words, more enduring than emotion. He is looking for obedience, not the kind of obedience that's easy when the path is smooth, but the kind that holds fast when nothing makes sense, the kind that says yes even when it hurts, even when it costs, even when the reward is not yet visible. Because what you do in the valley determines whether you are ready for the mountaintop. Obedience is the bridge between your current struggle and your coming breakthrough. It is the test of whether you trust God's timing more than your own desires. Too often we believe that breakthrough is something God simply drops into our lives, but Scripture tells us again and again that obedience is the posture that invites His blessing. God does not reward perfection. He rewards persistence in faithfulness. He rewards the heart that continues to say yes, even when every feeling says no. And it is in the moments of testing, when you are pressed on every side, when you're tempted to give up or take shortcuts, that your obedience speaks the loudest. When we look at the lives of those whom God used mightily, we see a common thread. They obeyed in seasons of darkness. Think of Abraham, who was told to leave everything familiar and go to a land he had never seen. He had no map, no guarantees, just a promise, and yet he obeyed. Or think of Noah, who was told to build an ark when there wasn't a single drop of rain in the sky. He obeyed not for a day, not for a week, but for over 100 years, despite ridicule, despite confusion, despite silence from God. His obedience during the testing became the very thing that saved him and his family. Obedience under pressure carries more weight than worship in comfort. It is in those testing seasons that our hearts are revealed. Do we follow God because of what He gives us, or because of who He is? Do we obey when it benefits us, or do we obey simply because He is worthy? God is not looking for those who can quote Scripture with passion while the sun shines. He is looking for those who will live Scripture in the storm, and that kind of obedience is not something you stumble into. It is a decision, a discipline, a devotion that declares, even if nothing changes, I will still honor you. There is something deeply spiritual about daily obedience, when no one sees, when no one applauds, when the reward is not immediate. But heaven sees, heaven notices, and heaven moves in response to that kind of faith. We see this with Joseph, a man who was sold by his brothers, falsely accused, thrown into prison, and forgotten. Yet he continued to walk in integrity. He obeyed God when it looked like obedience was leading nowhere. But all along, his faithfulness was shaping him. It was qualifying him. Because when the time came for him to stand before Pharaoh and lead a nation, he wasn't just gifted. He was grounded. His breakthrough didn't come overnight. It came through years of unseen obedience. You may feel like your obedience doesn't matter. You may feel like doing the right thing is costing you more than it's bringing you. But let me remind you, the testing always precedes the promotion. The sacrifice always precedes the blessing. And what you do in secret, what you do when it's hard, is what sets the stage for what God will do in public. Breakthrough doesn't come just because you want it. It comes when your heart and life are positioned for it. Obedience is that position. It's not glamorous, and it's not always easy, but it is powerful. It is the very thing that invites the hand of God to move. There will always be temptations during the test, temptations to quit, to take matters into your own hands, to justify disobedience with logic. You'll be tempted to believe that obedience doesn't work, that it doesn't make a difference. But remember, delayed obedience is still disobedience. Partial obedience is still disobedience. What unlocks God's best is full surrender. That doesn't mean you have to be perfect. It means your heart must be wholly His. It means you choose to trust Him even when you don't understand Him. The beauty of obedience during testing is that it not only prepares you for what's coming, it also draws you closer to the one who holds your future. Each act of faith, each moment of trust, deepens your intimacy with Him. It transforms your identity. You stop living for outcomes and start living in communion. You begin to realize that the breakthrough you were waiting for was never just about circumstances changing. It was about you changing. It was about you becoming the kind of person who could steward the promise with humility, wisdom, and compassion. God is not in a hurry. He will not give you something that will crush you. He loves you too much for that. So He tests, not to disqualify, but to purify. He waits, not to punish, but to prepare. And your obedience in the waiting is the key that unlocks the door to what He's been planning all along. Don't let the delay discourage you. Don't let the silence shake you. Every act of obedience is a seed planted, and in due season you will reap a harvest if you do not give up. So keep going, keep saying yes. Keep honoring God when no one else sees. Keep walking in righteousness when compromise looks easier. Keep trusting when the path is unclear, because your breakthrough is not behind you. It's not lost. It's ahead of you, and your obedience in this moment is the very thing preparing the way for it to come.